If only I had walked away the moment the lawyer finished reading. I didn't. Instead, I drove to the edge of town that same afternoon, stood in front of a building that looked like it had given up on itself years ago, and pushed the rusted door open. The air inside hit me first. Still. Heavy. The kind of air that hasn't moved in a long time, like something had been sealed in and forgotten. Paint peeled from the walls in long strips. The concrete floor was cracked. Pigeons had made a home in the rafters. My name is Nadia Owens. I am 29 years old. 3 weeks before I walked through that door, I buried both my parents in the same month. Dad on a Tuesday. Mom on a Saturday, 22 days later. The doctors said her heart gave out. I think she simply didn't want to stay without him. I was their youngest child. Their quieter one. The one who stayed close to home while my older brother Marcus built a life in another city, collected degrees, and came back for holidays wearing clothes that cost more than my rent. My parents left Marcus the house, the savings, the car. They left me the warehouse. I thought it was a mistake. It wasn't. The reading of the will happened in a small office downtown. The lawyer's name was Mr. Aldous Webb, a thin man with wire glasses and a careful way of holding his hands flat on the table when he spoke. He read every item slowly, like each word had weight. Marcus got the house on Fenwick Street, worth close to $400,000. He got the savings account, the furniture, the old truck Dad used for fishing trips. He got the photo albums, the good silverware, and a letter Mom had written him by hand. I sat very still through all of it. Then Mr. Webb looked at me. Not at the paper. At me. To my daughter Nadia, he read, I leave the property at 14 Crail Road. The warehouse. Everything inside it. And everything it holds. Marcus turned to look at me. His face did something complicated. The room went quiet. I expected Mr. Webb to keep reading, to explain, to add something that made it make sense. Instead, he closed the folder. And he kept watching me, not with pity, not with apology, but with something else entirely. Something careful. Like a man who knew the ground under my feet was about to shift. After the reading, Marcus and I walked to our cars without speaking much. The sky was white and flat above the parking lot. The kind of sky that felt like it was pressing down. They probably just forgot to update it, Marcus said finally. He was being kind. I could tell by the way he wouldn't quite meet my eyes. The house has appreciated a lot. We can split things fairly. I'll talk to a realtor, get you your share. You don't have to do that, I said. Nadia. He touched my shoulder. Don't be difficult. You got a warehouse. A broken-down warehouse. That's not fair to you. I nodded. Didn't argue. But on the drive home, I kept thinking about Mr. Webb's face. The way he looked at me when he read my name. Not sorry for me. Alert. Like a man watching someone open a letter he already knew the contents of. I lay awake that night replaying the moment. My parents had been careful people. Deliberate people. They didn't forget things. They didn't make mistakes on paperwork. They had chosen to give me that warehouse. The question was why. The next morning, someone came to see me. I was still in my robe, coffee going cold on the counter, when the knock came. He was standing on my front step looking like he belonged somewhere more expensive. A dark suit, not flashy but precise. Shoes that caught the light. Silver hair, neatly cut. The kind of man who gets offered the best table without asking. He introduced himself as Mr. Colin Farr. He said he was a property developer. I heard about your parents, he said. His voice was smooth, unhurried, like he had all day and knew it. I'm very sorry for your loss. Both of them, so close together. That must have been hard. I thanked him. Waited. I've had my eye on the Crail Road property for some time, he said. I'd like to make you an offer. He named a price. I blinked. It was nearly 3 times what a building in that condition should have been worth. A building at the wrong end of a road nobody used, in a part of town that had been declining for 20 years. Why? I asked. He smiled. Just slightly. Some things are worth more than they look. Then he added, quieter, you shouldn't go inside it alone. I told him I would think about it. He left a card. I turned it over in my fingers after he drove away. Heavy cardstock. No company logo. Just his name and a phone number. 3 times market value. I sat with it all morning. The sensible thing was obvious. Take the money. Split it fairly with Marcus. Move on. But something about the way Colin Farr had looked at the warehouse when I mentioned it was unsettling. Not like a man picturing a future building. Like a man checking on something he had left behind. And then there was what he said. You shouldn't go inside it alone. Not it's unsafe in there or the structure needs work. He said it like a warning. Like he knew something I didn't. Like the danger wasn't in the ceiling beams or the rotten floorboards. Like the danger was something else entirely. I got dressed. Found my jacket. Drove to Crail Road. Curiosity, I've learned, does not respond to reason. It just pulls. The warehouse sat at the end of a gravel lane lined with overgrown grass. There was a chain-link fence around the perimeter, but the gate had rusted open years ago. The building itself was large, single-story, with high windows that were mostly covered from the inside with what looked like old board and cardboard. I pushed the front door open and went in. The air hit me again. That same heavy stillness. The smell of concrete and damp and something faintly chemical that I couldn't name. I walked slowly toward the middle of the floor. And then I saw it. Painted directly onto the concrete, maybe 10 feet wide. Faded, almost gone in places, like someone had tried to clean it without fully succeeding. A circle, and inside the circle, a series of symbols arranged like spokes on a wheel. In the very center, a shape I couldn't quite name but felt certain I'd seen before. My chest tightened the moment I looked at it. I crouched down and reached out. The tip of my finger brushed the edge of the painted circle. Behind me, something exhaled. Slow. Quiet. Measured. I turned fast. Just shadows. But someone was in there with me. I knew it the way you know when a room has changed while you weren't looking. I backed toward the door, and then I heard footsteps. They didn't match mine. I got out fast. Stood in the open air, heart going hard in my chest, and looked back at the building. Nothing moved. No one came out. I told myself it could have been a stray dog. A bird. The building settling. I told myself that for about 5 minutes, and then I stopped believing it. I drove home and sat at the kitchen table and tried to remember where I had seen that symbol before. It pulled at something in the back of my mind, faint and distant, like a word that won't come. That evening, while I was on the porch trying to think, an old man appeared at the bottom of my front steps. He moved slowly but with purpose, the kind of man who has learned not to waste energy on things that don't matter. His face was deeply lined. His eyes were dark and steady. You went inside, he said. Not a question. I stared at him. Do I know you? Your father did. He looked past me at the street, then back. He left you that place because you were the only one who wouldn't sell it. I haven't decided anything yet. Not yet, he agreed. But you will. He leaned just slightly closer, his voice dropping. Whatever you do, don't let Farr get it. Whatever he tells you, whatever he offers, don't let him get it. He turned and walked away. I didn't even get his name. I called Marcus that night. I asked him, carefully, what he remembered about the warehouse. Whether our parents had ever talked about it. Whether he knew why they owned it. He was quiet for a long time. Dad bought it when I was in high school, he said. I always figured it was some investment idea he never followed through on. You know how he was with projects. Did he ever take you there? Once. I was maybe 16. He drove me out there and showed me the outside. Said he was going to fix it up. A pause. He never did. Did he seem strange about it? Dad was always a little strange. Marcus's voice had a small smile in it, the kind that hurts. Why are you asking? I thought about the man at the bottom of my steps. About Colin Farr's warning. About that painted symbol on the concrete floor. I'm just trying to understand why they left it to me, I said. Because they knew you'd hold on to it, Marcus said simply. You always held on to things. I thought about that for a long time after I hung up. I started watching. For the next 4 days I watched Colin Farr the way you watch something you don't fully understand. I looked up his name. Found a clean professional profile. Commercial properties, development projects, civic committees. His name appeared at charity dinners and on the boards of local organizations. The kind of man who exists in photographs next to mayors. But the more I looked, the stranger it got. 3 people who had worked with him on projects over the past few years had something in common. A contractor who had renovated one of his buildings. A woman who had sold him a property 2 years ago. A man who had served on a committee with him. All 3 had changed. The contractor's wife had posted online, worried. He had become forgetful. Disoriented. He forgot her name once, she wrote, laughing at herself for writing it, as if she couldn't let herself take it seriously. The woman who'd sold him the property had stopped working, stopped going out, her social media going silent. The committee member had left his job, moved away, and no one seemed to know where. Subtle at first. Then obvious. And every single one of them had been inside that warehouse. I knew because I found the records. Old property visit logs, permits, inspection documents. Their names were all on the same list. I stopped sleeping well after that. I went back. This time I brought a flashlight and my phone. I told Marcus where I was going, left the address on a note on my counter. I stood at the front door for a full minute before I went in. The main room was the same. The symbol on the floor. The stillness. The pigeons watching from the high rafters. But this time I moved past the main room, deeper into the building. There was a hallway at the back I hadn't noticed before, half hidden behind a collapsed metal shelving unit. And at the end of that hallway, a door. It was newer than everything else in the building. Steel frame. Heavy lock. It was not original to the warehouse. Someone had installed it deliberately and recently. The lock was broken. I pushed the door open. Inside were files. Dozens of them, arranged in neat cardboard boxes on metal shelving that was clean and dry, nothing like the rest of the building. Each box was labeled with a year. The earliest went back 11 years. I opened the nearest one and started reading. Every file was about a person. Names, addresses, dates. Notes written in a tight, careful hand. And each file ended the same way, a final entry, a date, and 2 words. Transfer complete. I sat on the floor of that back room for a long time. The files were thorough. Each one tracked a person from first contact to something the notes called integration. There were dates of meetings, dates of visits to specific locations, including, in almost every case, an address I recognized. 14, Crail Road. My warehouse. And running through all of them, referenced in note after note, the same name. Colin Farr. Sometimes as the initiator. Sometimes as the one who gave final approval. Always present. My parents had been collecting these files for years. That was the moment I understood what I was holding. Not just paper. Evidence. A careful, patient record of something that had been happening in this town for over a decade. My parents had known. They had documented everything they could find and they had hidden it in the one place they trusted would stay untouched. They hadn't left me a warehouse. They had left me an investigation. I photographed every file with my phone. All of it. Every page. Then I heard the front door of the warehouse open. I turned off my flashlight and stood still. Footsteps crossed the main room. Slow. Unhurried. The footsteps of someone who was not afraid. I pressed myself against the wall beside the file room door and waited. The footsteps stopped just outside the hallway. Then Colin Farr's voice. "You should have taken the money, Nadia." He didn't sound angry. He sounded the way someone sounds when a small inconvenience has grown into a larger one. I didn't answer. "Your parents were the same way," he said. Patient. Stubborn. They spent 4 years building that collection in there and never once understood the full picture. A pause. "Come out. Let's talk like adults." I stayed where I was. "You're not in danger," he said. "I don't work that way. What I do requires cooperation. Willingness. The people in those files chose to be part of something. They simply don't remember choosing." And then, finally, I understood what the files meant. What transfer complete meant. The people hadn't just changed. They had been changed. Something had been taken from them. Not objects. Something interior. I raised my phone and pressed record. He spoke for several minutes. I think he believed I was trapped and frightened and that explaining himself was a form of control. And maybe it was. But it was also the stupidest thing he could have done. He talked about power. About how money was temporary but identity was permanent. How if you understood how a person was built, understood their memories and their sense of self, you could reshape that understanding. Replace it. He had spent 15 years developing a method, he said. The warehouse was part of it, a specific environment, specific compounds in the air, specific low-frequency sounds that made the mind soft and open. Your parents got close, he said. Too close. I was prepared to wait them out. People get old. They get tired. But then they gave the building to you. He sounded almost amused. They really believed you could finish what they started. Did they know what you were doing to people? I called out. My voice was steadier than I expected. They suspected. They were never certain. A pause. You're not certain either. I have 43 files that say otherwise. Silence. Come out, he said. And this time the smoothness was gone. I had a choice to make and about 3 seconds to make it. The back room had no other exit. The only way out was through the hallway, through the main room, and out the front door. Far was somewhere between me and that door. I turned my flashlight back on. I walked out of the back room, into the hallway, and toward the main space. Far was standing near the painted symbol on the floor. He was alone. He looked at my phone in my hand and understood immediately. How long has that been recording? He asked. Long enough. He took a step toward me. I took 2 steps back toward the front door. Give me the phone, he said. No. Nadia. His voice had gone very quiet and very controlled. You don't know what you're interfering with. The people in those files are fine. They are functioning members of society. They simply have a different understanding of themselves. You took something from them. I gave them clarity. You took their memories. Their sense of who they are. I kept moving toward the door. That's not clarity. That's theft. He moved fast for a man his age. But I was already at the door. I got through it. Pulled it shut behind me. The chain I had brought on a hunch, my one prepared decision, was already threaded through the exterior handles. I snapped the padlock shut. Then I made the call. I called Mr. Aldous Webb first. I know that sounds strange. But I had been thinking about the way he watched me in that office, and I had decided that a lawyer who looked at someone the way he looked at me was either part of the problem or had been waiting for someone to act. I needed to know which one, and I needed to know fast. He picked up on the second ring. Miss Owens, he said, before I had a chance to speak. I've been wondering how long it would take. You knew, I said. I knew your parents trusted you with something important. I didn't know exactly what. They were careful with me too. A pause. What do you need? I told him. He was quiet while I talked. When I finished, he said, stay exactly where you are. Don't let anyone near the front entrance. I'm making calls. 20 minutes later, 2 police cars turned onto Crail Road. Behind them, an unmarked vehicle with State Investigative Authority, called in by Mr. Webb through a contact my parents had apparently spent 2 years cultivating. The chain held. Colin Farr was still inside. He didn't run when they opened the door. He walked out quietly, looking at nothing in particular. The smoothness was completely gone. He looked, for the first time, like a man who knew it was over. The next several days were the kind that rearrange your understanding of everything. The investigators went through the warehouse with equipment I didn't recognize and protocols I didn't know existed. They confirmed the air composition. A specific compound, odorless and slow-acting, had been pumped through the building's old ventilation system for years. It didn't cause unconsciousness. It caused what the investigator who briefed me called heightened suggestibility, making the mind temporarily open to new information about itself. Combined with the low-frequency sound system hidden in the walls and a structured conversation technique Farr had developed, the result was exactly what his files described. People left with different memories than they arrived with. Not completely different. Carefully, precisely different. Enough to shift loyalty, silence suspicion, change the way they understood their own lives and choices. 43 people over 11 years. The investigator showed me the technical report. I sat with it for a long time, reading slowly the way I always do, making sure I understood each piece before moving to the next. My parents had never gone inside the warehouse themselves. They had figured out what the building was being used for from the outside. That was why they bought it. Not as an investment. As a lock. Marcus drove down from the city the day after the arrest. He sat in my kitchen and I told him everything from the beginning. He didn't speak for a very long time after I finished. How long did they know? He said finally. From the files, at least 4 years. Maybe longer. And they never told me. They told me, I said. They just told me in a language I didn't know yet. He looked at his hands. I always thought they were harder on you. Expected more from you. I think they just knew me differently. I paused. I used to think being the quiet one meant being the overlooked one. I don't think that anymore. They trusted you with this. Yes. He was quiet again. Then, you went in there alone. I had a plan. You had a padlock and a phone. That was the plan. He looked at me the way older siblings look at you when they're trying to stay annoyed and failing. Then he put his arm around my shoulders and we sat there in the kitchen for a while without saying anything else. Some things don't need words. Mr. Webb told me something important the week after the arrest. My parents had visited him 3 years earlier, not about the will, but about something else. They had brought him a sealed document and asked him to hold it. Not to open it. Not to share it. Just to hold it, and to give it to Nadia when the time came. He handed it to me across his desk. Thick envelope. My name on the front in my father's handwriting. I waited until I was home to open it. Inside was a letter. 2 pages. My father's voice so clearly in every line that I had to stop twice and just breathe before continuing. He wrote about the warehouse. About how they had discovered what Colin Farr was doing. About the files they had quietly assembled and hidden. About their decision not to involve the police directly until they had enough evidence to make sure the case would hold. Then he wrote about me. You were never the overlooked one, Nadia. We gave you the warehouse because you were the only one we trusted to hold on to it without understanding why. Marcus would have sold it. He's practical. You're patient. There's a difference, and it matters more than we ever knew how to say. I held that letter for a long time. The public part of it came quickly. Colin Farr had been a significant figure in the town for 15 years. His name was on buildings. His face was on fundraising pamphlets. People had trusted him the way you trust someone who is always present and always calm and always seemingly on your side. The day the charges were announced, the local paper ran it at the top of the front page. I didn't read it right away. I had learned by then to let things settle before I approached them. But I heard about the reaction. The disbelief, then the slow, painful reckoning. His colleagues. The civic board members who had sat next to him for years. The people who had contributed money to his projects. A particular silence fell over certain parts of town, the silence of people updating their understanding of things they thought they knew. 3 of the 43 people in the files came forward publicly in the first week. They described the experiences imperfectly, because memory was the thing that had been worked on, and it was hard to name what had changed. But they tried. The investigators used my photographs of the files alongside the physical originals to build the case. The case held. I went back to the warehouse one last time before the investigators finished and locked it as a protected site. It was a bright morning. Cold and clear. The building looked the same as it always had, which I found strange, given everything. Bad things rarely announce themselves in their appearance. That, I suppose, was the whole point. I stood in the main room and looked at the painted symbol on the floor. In daylight, with everything I now knew, I could see it more clearly. It was part of the system. Something Farr had used as a visual anchor during his process. One more piece of a mechanism designed to dismantle and replace. I thought about the old man who had appeared at the bottom of my steps. I had tried to find him through Mr. Webb and through the investigators and had gotten nowhere. Mr. Webb thought he might have been someone my parents knew from their early research. Someone who had seen enough to be afraid but not enough to act. He had pointed me in the right direction. Sometimes that's all anyone can do. I looked at the symbol for a long moment. Then I turned around and walked out. 3 months after the arrest, one of the people from the files found me. Her name was Patrice. She was in her 40s, a former schoolteacher who had sold a property adjacent to Farr's development site 2 years earlier and had changed so completely afterward that her sister had stopped recognizing her. She sat across from me at a coffee shop and told me that the investigation had helped her. That having access to the actual record of what had happened to her, the dates and the methods, had given her something to hold on to. Proof that the change in her was not her fault. Not the natural drift of personality over time. Not mental illness. Something done to her by someone else. I'm still not all the way back, she said. The doctors say it may take years. Some of it may not fully come back. She paused, looking at the table. But I know what happened. That's more than I had before. She thanked me. I didn't know what to say, so I just said she was welcome, and I meant it, and then we sat for a while with our coffee and didn't try to fill the silence with anything that didn't fit. Marcus and I sorted out the inheritance more carefully in the months that followed. He signed the house over to me at a reduced price I could actually pay over time, and I put the warehouse into a legal trust under Mr. Webb's guidance, keeping it out of private hands until the case was fully resolved. Our relationship shifted in a way neither of us named directly. He called more often. Asked questions he hadn't asked before. Not big questions. Small ones. How I was sleeping. Whether I was eating properly. Whether I needed him to come down. I understood that he was doing what he had always done, just with more of himself in it. I thought I had the better part of the will, he said once. You got the house, I said. You got the story. I got the responsibility. Same thing, he said. In this family. He was right. Colin Farr entered a guilty plea 6 months after his arrest. I was not in the courtroom. I chose not to be. I had given my statement, provided my photographs and my recording, and I had decided that watching the end of his story was not something I needed in order to complete my own. Mr. Webb called me afterward. It's done, he said. How did he seem? Calm, he said. Which was somehow worse than if he had been angry. I thought about that. About a man who had spent 15 years believing he was simply doing something the rest of the world was too small to understand. About the particular blindness of people who confuse capability with permission. My parents, I said. Do you think they knew how it would end? Mr. Webb was quiet for a moment. I think they knew what they were doing. I'm not sure they knew they wouldn't be here for the ending. Another pause. But I think they believed you would be. I thanked him and ended the call. Stood at my kitchen window for a while, watching the yard. I found something else in the warehouse, after the investigation concluded and the property was released back to my trust. It was in the file room, behind one of the shelving units, in a gap in the wall that had been plastered over and repainted. A small tin box. The kind you keep letters in. Inside, 2 photographs and a folded note. The photographs were of my parents, young, maybe in their early 30s. Standing in front of the warehouse. Smiling. Not the strained, careful smiles of people doing something hard, but genuine ones. Like people who had decided something together and were at peace with the decision. The note was in my mother's handwriting. If you found this, you already know everything important. You were always more than you were told. We are proud of the person you became before any of this. Everything after is just proof of what we already knew. Take care of Marcus. Don't be too hard on yourself. And please, eat properly. You forget. I laughed out loud in that empty warehouse. The sound echoed off the concrete and the high ceiling. My mother, in the middle of everything else, still finding space to worry about whether I was eating. I stand in the warehouse now, on a Saturday morning in early spring. It is mine, properly and completely, the legal process finished, the trust settled. The investigators took the ventilation equipment and the sound system and the files. What remains is just a building. Just a building my parents decided to keep. I have been thinking about what to do with it. There are practical options. There are profitable ones. There are options that honor what happened here and ones that simply move past it. I haven't decided yet. I am still a patient person. I still take my time. But I know this, I will not sell it to someone who looks at it the way Colin Farr looked at it. Not like a property. Like a tool. My parents built something in the years before they died. Not a fortune, not a legacy in the way people usually mean that word. They built a record of the truth. They found someone they trusted to carry it forward, and they handed it to her in the form of an old building at the end of a gravel road that everyone else pitied her for receiving. I used to think being overlooked was the worst thing that could happen to you. Now I understand it was the very thing that kept me safe. And when I finally walked out of the darkness and into the light, I brought the truth with me. That was all they ever asked.